Hey, Loki was pretty good, wasn't it? I think most people agree on that, so it's probably not a massive surprise that I like Loki, especially since this show is actually the topic of the first Pillar of Garbage video I ever made. What might be more surprising though is that, as of today, so long as I get this video done on time, Loki's a year old. 12 whole months. Only 17 more years to go until the Loki series can legally go for a cheeky pint with the boys. But this anniversary is significant for two reasons. One, it's an uncomfortable reminder of the ceaseless, remorseless march of Father Time, of the fact that one day, everyone and everything we've ever known will be but dust in a cold, dead universe. And two, this anniversary means it's time for another one of my Disney Plus anniversary retrospectives. Initially with WandaVision back in January, and then with the Falcon Bucky show in March, I've put out videos critically analysing what these projects were and what they managed to accomplish. The idea is that with a little space from the hype at release, and by bearing in mind the way fan reception of these properties has shifted over a 12-month period, now's probably the best time to objectively approach these shows, and get to grips with what they say, what they do, and how they do it. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at why Loki worked so well. Well enough that 1 year on, it's remained the highlight of Disney Plus for a lot of viewers. And we'll also think a little about how far this lofty spot in the rankings is justified. But before we get to that, in case you haven't actually seen the show, or in case you're watching this video in the distant future and can't remember what happens, you're in luck, because coincidentally, this next section's a fun little mini recap of the show's events. Basically, Loki's a godly being, causing mischief on Earth when, as a result of some clumsy time-traveling Avengers, he's arrested by the TVA for something called sequence violation. It turns out that the TVA are the Time Variance Authority, and that the incontrovertible blueprint for this sacred timeline's proper sequence of events has been broken. Ostensibly, the TVA enforce the proper flow of time, and Loki's given a show trial and condemned to what's essentially a death sentence before he's saved by Agent Mobius, another TVA agent to help catch a more dangerous Loki variant, another version of Loki who's damaging the timeline and threatening the TVA. After a bit of discount therapy, the two get to work and find the variant, who turns out to be from a timeline where Loki was born female. Oh yeah, and by this point, our Loki's decided that he's going to take over the TVA. Sylvie, that's her name, launches an attack on the TVA and Loki goes after her. Yada yada yada. By the time they're found by the TVA, Loki's kind of on her side now, and also kinda into her, or himself, or whatever. Basically, the TVA ruined Sylvie's life, and she's been on the run for eons. So her goal now is to destroy the system, the TVA. And yeah, they're recaptured. But due to Sylvie revealing to a few key TVA agents that, plot twist, they're all actually variants themselves, plucked from diverging points in the sacred timeline, and brainwashed to serve the TVA, Sylvie and Loki are able to reach the Timekeepers themselves and kill them. But the so-called Timekeepers are robots, puppets. Someone else is running the show, and the TVA don't even know it. The whole thing's a sham. And before the duo can take stock, Loki's pruned, seemingly disintegrated. It turns out, though, that when the TVA prune things, they actually just get shoved into a big void at the end of time, so that's where he is. Back at the TVA, Sylvie realizes that if there was a puppet master pulling the strings of the TVA and masterminding the timeline for their own purposes, the only place to hide would be somewhere in or beyond said void. So she self-prunes, and in the void, assisted by a motley crew of Loki variants and Mobius, who also got shanked by a time shiv, our duo manages to bewitch a big smoky boy and reach
the Citadel at the end of time.
It turns out that the shadowy puppet master is just some guy, but all this skullduggery and all the cosmic machinery of the TVA does have a reason. Sure, this guy, the last remaining fella at the end of time, probably isn't the most reliable narrator, but ostensibly, the sacred timeline, the mass abduction and disposal of trillions of, quote, variants across time and space, is what must be done to prevent the different timelines from going to war with one another, a conflict which has the potential to destroy the multiverse. He who remains then gives the two errant Lokis a choice. Kill him and destroy this mechanism, running the risk of his variants destroying all existence, or take over control of this system for themselves. Loki and Sylvie can't quite agree, and long story short, their differing ideologies and growing romantic bond coming up against this grand philosophical question results in a little snafu. Sylvie kills He Who Remains and sends Loki back to the TVA. That's the last we see of Sylvie, but she has managed to destroy the sacred timeline once and for all, as we learn when we see that the TVA Loki's arrived in isn't the one he left, and is seemingly now led by a likely belligerent variant of He Who Remains. So, there's time travel, romance, pontification about freedom, fate, and all that, sleuthing, Richard E. Grant, and yeah, that's Loki. And I know there's at least one guy out there who's thinking,
wow, I can't believe you just did a full recap of the plot to add a couple more minutes of runtime onto your video.
But for real, I know I've got some viewers who like to watch my content even without having seen the stuff I'm discussing, so I think on balance a quick refresher's worthwhile. Plus, it'll just make it clearer when I'm referring back to some of these plot points later. And hey, I don't want this to get any longer. I've got a really short attention span, and recording and editing longer videos honestly makes me go kinda Jack Torrance mode sometimes, so I've tried to keep it snappy. But sure, Guy, if you want to get into analysis, let's jump into that. There's a number of ways this show goes above and beyond a lot of the MCU's offerings, and I think the most obvious example to begin with is the score. Natalie Holt created a bizarre and beautiful suite of tracks which really elevate this show and its world, chock full of warbling vintage synths, ticking clocks, and I think even some theremin here and there. I'd play it now, but I'm pretty sure that'd get me demonetized, so if you can't remember it, honestly just go and look it up and give it a listen. It's definitely worth your time. I remember when the show was coming out for the first time, I'd always sit through at least the start of the credits just to hear that main theme hit.
You are not putting that on again. Marcel, okay, if you press that button, you are in very, very big trouble.
The thing is, this score isn't just good, it also fits the whole aesthetic of the TVA to a T. It's like a soundtrack from a parallel weirder version of the 70s, with a sci-fi space-age twist. It sounds monumental and idiosyncratic at the same time, and there's an unsettling edge to the whole thing, the hint that something isn't right here. That matches the setting perfectly, which by the way is also top-notch. It's like backroom sci-fi nightmare chic, but grounded in this utterly, weirdly mundane sensibility. It's at once the high-tech control center for a vast, incomprehensible empire, and like some weird, forgotten mid-century office space. And this weird mundanity of the TVA, the way it embraces this phantom liminal identity, works to make the viewer feel the way Loki does, the way any of the variant prisoners do, the way even some of the TVA employees surely see the organization, as this sublime, unknowable labyrinth of bureaucracy, whose true extent is just so far beyond understanding that upon beholding any one of these uncountable identical spaces, the subject, the observer, is reduced to utter insignificance. This is perfectly visualized hyperspace in the postmodern sense. You're lost in it. We'll come back to the idea of insignificance because it's really important to this show, but it's also worth noting this show's wider visual success. The VFX is typically pretty good here. Some Disney Plus projects have seemed, let's say, rushed or half-baked in this regard, but Loki's clearly had enough time in the oven, and outside of the TVA itself, things tend to look pretty good. The color grading on Lamentis feels a little over the top maybe, but the Void, Alioth, the variant Lokis, that whole Asgard illusion sequence all looks spellbinding. And even Lamentis is actually pretty well designed, once your eyes adjust to all that purple. I also really just love the visual similarities between the rich alien classes here and the rich Kree aesthetic from the future bit in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It makes sense that other species and worlds pattern their high-class culture in imitation of this massively powerful empire. It's like a space culture victory. And yeah, I know that Marvel Studios doesn't care about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and that this is likely unintentional, but it's a cool little link I'm gonna believe in until it gets officially debunked, which, let's be honest, isn't going to happen. Some people have criticized the fight choreography in Loki, and honestly, that's fair. It's hardly Marvel's best, but this doesn't really feel like a big flaw to me for a couple of reasons. First, this isn't an action show, it's more concerned with building a mystery, and with exploring the deepest corners of both the Marvel multiverse and our central characters. And second, while sure, moments seem a little stilted and overdramatic, that kind of works for me. The fact that moments like this seem more like theatre, like stage fights, than say the action in a Captain America film feels right for a show around Loki, the prince of pomp and performance. Is it a little janky at times? Sure, but it's an appropriate jankiness, a very Loki jankiness. And maybe that's just copium on my end, since I like this show, but regardless, it really doesn't bother me at all on rewatch. This is also a really well-acted show. We already knew Tom Hiddleston was a certified Giga Chad in the main role, but there's some surprises here too, like Owen Wilson's delightfully nuanced Mobius, Wunmi Mosaku's compelling Hunter B-15, or Richard E. Grant's utterly scene-stealing role, and really all of the main roles here are believable and enjoyable to watch. Kid Loki's got a touch of child actor-itis, but everywhere you look, from smaller roles like C-20 to bigger ones like Sylvie or Ravonna, everyone's bringing their A-game here. Even Pillboy's killing it. I also think there's another way this show stands apart from the MCU, or at least from the other Disney Plus offerings. See, from my viewpoint in mid-2022, there's something of a rhythm a lot of these seem to fall into, a generally similar pacing structure. It's hard to articulate, but if you've seen more than a couple of these, I'm sure you'll know what I mean. But Loki doesn't really follow this. There's no penultimate episode flashback dump. There's no big action set piece at the end. It's more of a consistent journey with tension and release throughout, all the while building up to the revelations we end on. This may partially be due to the fact that Loki's already an established character, so we don't need the exposition, the childhood backstory, and all that, but whatever the reason, 1 year on, Loki feels a bit less production-liney than some of the others. Of course, good pacing's not worth much without a good story, and Loki's really works for me, even on rewatch. It's not a mystery box thing, so the twists and turns the narratives take are enjoyable even when you know the ending. The side stories, the minor narratives too, are engaging and well told, like Ravonna and Mobius' conflict between truth and structure, or classic Loki's struggle for redemption, for his own glorious purpose. And speaking of glorious purpose, let's go back to the main story, but looking a little deeper this time. Earlier I mentioned the sense of sublime insignificance that the TVA's design gives off, and I think that's an important point to circle back to, because in many ways, Loki is a show all about navigating insignificance, grappling with the existential struggle of objective meaninglessness within a vast cosmos, and emerging from the other side of this crisis.
Nothing matters! Nothing has any consequence! Dance while you still can!
We see the beginning of this journey in the first episode. Within the course of a few minutes at the TVA, we see Loki go from a preening, self-important so-called god to a little speck in an unthinkably large world. We see Loki humbled. These people have the ability to negate his magic, to neutralize even an Infinity Stone, and they're like middle management. In the face of this, Loki's glorious purpose to conquer like a planet is a joke. Incidentally, this is why the TVA, the whole timeline, multiverse stuff is the perfect background for a Loki series, or at least a Loki series which aims to rehabilitate the character. Because if you're a writer trying to do this, to put Loki in a position where his self-importance is challenged, what better way to do this is there than increasing the scale of the world to match Loki's own massive ego? Think about it. Normal people like you or I might feel insignificant in our world, but when Loki's here, he doesn't. He's a god. Even on an interplanetary level, Loki's a prince of Asgard. He's always been a somebody, but if you take that character and put him in a place which controls all of space across all of time, and every alternate version of time-space, he goes from a god to an ant, and that humanizes him. It also allows the show to explore existential themes on this new human level. So this setting for this character, that's smart writing, plain and simple. But this humbling, this redemption, this successful navigation of insignificance doesn't come to fruition right away. After this initial shock, we see Loki attempting to reconfigure himself, adjusting his usual MO to this new scaled-up setting. Instead of Midgard, the target's now the TVA, and instead of sucking up to Odin or Thanos to learn the ropes and siphon some power, it's now Mobius and the agents. But this doesn't work. None of this works. The scale of this new environment and its new threats are too vast, too unknown for Loki's standard tactics, and so he's bested by Sylvie when they meet. I think it's at this point that it all starts starts to sink in for Loki. On Lamentis, bested by his alternate self, in the ruins of his latest grand scheme, and facing an apocalypse, he really starts to come to terms with the fact that ultimately he's kind of a nobody too, just like the rest of us. Notably, whenever glorious purpose is invoked from this point onwards, it's done kind of ironically. But just because he's not really that big a deal, objectively speaking, just because the universe owes him nothing, that doesn't mean there's no meaning to be found, or that there's no worthwhile goals to strive for. On Lamentis, we see Loki beginning to bond with Sylvie, to take genuine pleasure in her company. This is real meaning being generated, meaning that persists even in the face of insignificance. We see this clearly when the two Lokis embrace as the moon bears down on them in episode 4. It's the end of the world, but their connection is worthwhile in spite of this. But there's also meaning beyond the personal discovered by Loki here, as this is when he begins to move away from his rule the TVA plan and towards Sylvie's burn it all down approach. Stopping people like Sylvie from having their lives destroyed by the TVA, that begins to matter to Loki too. It's these newfound motivations which drive Loki to keep going, even in the face of what appears to be an utterly insurmountable obstacle, the void at the end of time. But it's not even just our Loki who we see find meaning, overcome the existential paralysis of multiversal insignificance. In a supremely cathartic sequence, we see classic Loki escape his own ennui and give his life for the cause. After this though, in the show's finale, something funny happens. See, in other genres, and in cinema more widely, this whole existential finding meaning despite cosmic insignificance thing is fairly well-trodden ground. But the high-concept sci-fi of Loki means that the show's able to approach this dilemma in a fairly novel way. That is, by actually permitting our characters to approach something resembling significance. That's what happens in episode 6. He who remains is essentially a god, a real one. That cosmic insignificance that the rest of us struggle against, he's above it. He dictates the flow of the universe, of every universe. So we might think Sylvie's conquered insignificance by killing He Who Remains, that this act has made her significant, that she's asserted herself, her identity, onto infinity. But I'm not so sure that this is the case. After all, the result of this act is to expand existence even further, to rebirth the multiverse proper. Now uncountable time streams exist once more, each with the potential to destroy one another. Loki and Sylvie were already just ants in a vast cosmos, but now they're even smaller, even less unique, even less important. But that doesn't mean their lives and their acts are meaningless. Sylvie's accomplished her mission. No longer will the TVA abduct variants like her to protect some false sacred timeline. Maybe the alternative is worse. Maybe on some grand utilitarian calculus, she's worsened things. But she's destroyed an unjust system, and that means something. Not to the universe, but to her. And Loki's surrender to love overruling the TVA, over glorious purpose, shows a similar embrace of meaning, even in the face of a vast, uncaring multiverse. Speaking of the multiverse, that's why this was the perfect place to introduce this concept to the MCU, because here it's not just a narrative gimmick like it arguably is in, say, No Way Home. No, the sublime vastness of the multiverse, of infinite possible timelines, allows a god like Loki to be humbled and humanized. It allows the show to explore existential ideas through him in a way that feels genuine and authentic to the human experience. Like I said in my Multiverse of Madness video, the multiverse is an interesting concept to me not when it allows old actors to return to roles, or when it leads to cameos or whatever, but when it adds thematic weight to a story, or when it permits new and unique narratives to be told, like we saw in Loki. It's also a cool way to let Hiddleston explore a more heroic version of his long-standing character. As I noted in another Loki video a few months back, 616 Loki's been a villain, but also a hero, as well as various shades of grey between the two. Due to the nature of big-budget franchise films like the MCU, these other nuances to the long-running comic book character would probably never have been adapted at all if it weren't for this Loki series, and the way it soft rebooted the character into a persona almost comparable to, say, Agent of Asgard-era Loki. Early leaks even suggested that Marvel was going to lean even harder in this direction, with Loki having more of the time-traveling detective vibe we saw mostly in episode 2. And I think that could have really worked if the series had been given more episodes to play with. There's a few elements like this in the series which feel slightly underdeveloped, like that whole DB Cooper thing in episode 1. But at the end of the day, I think we're best to focus on the series we got, rather than potentially different versions of it that may exist somewhere out there in the multiverse. And hey, maybe we'll see some of these angles played up in the second series. This show did have a few controversies too, and I think that 1 year on, we're maybe in a better place to evaluate how valid these criticisms are. For instance, some people took issue at the specifics of how all the time travel-y multiverse variant stuff worked. Not all of the explanations line up perfectly with each other, let alone with what we've heard about the multiverse and time travel in other MCU properties. And this has some truth to it. It doesn't all line up perfectly, but I don't think this really matters that much. It doesn't impinge on the story, the characters, the meaning of the series. Would it be nice if it were all a little more worked out? Sure, but there's a reason nearly every property which tackles concepts like this ends up riddled with confusing or contradictory issues, because we don't understand, and possibly can't understand, how time travel or the multiverse would work in real life. So I don't think we can be too harsh on fiction that hasn't got it all fully worked out either. Plus, a lot of the jargon and explanations we're given early on are potentially invalidated by the reveal that the TVA are a bunch of gosh darn clowns who don't even know what they're really doing. So even when things don't line up, like the idea that this was supposed to happen, but this, its inevitable consequence, was not, I don't think it's worth tying ourselves up in knots trying to puzzle it out. Let's just accept the slight confusion, because if anything, this incomprehensibility only adds to the Kafkaesque bureaucratic fever dream atmosphere of the TVA. I'm similarly unconcerned with criticisms like the fact that for a supposedly universal agency, we never see any non-humans in the TVA. This is another one of those things which the show could have done, things which could have worked, and even added something to the series. But is the show harmed for not including them? I don't think so. And another empty controversy in my eyes was all the backlash against the finale, but I've covered why that's silly before. One of the criticisms with perhaps more merit, though, is the way the show handled sexuality and gender. Or, didn't really handle them. To be clear, in case you're new here, I'm not doing some idiotic she-you bit. No, I'm talking about the issues some queer viewers had with the fleeting mention of Loki's bisexuality, and the lack of any adaptation of the gender fluidity of Loki's comic book inspiration. The really incremental integration of LGBTQ+ elements to both Loki and the wider MCU is frustratingly slow, and as of present, pretty insubstantial. And this is almost certainly thanks to Disney's desire to make content palatable to both progressives and conservatives. I think that's all absolutely true. There's a wider problem here. But I'll be honest, I'm not fully convinced by some of the critiques I've seen of Loki specifically. I'm thinking primarily of stuff like Verily Bitchy's video commodifying bi validation, Loki versus Russell T Davies. By and large, I think that's a fantastic video, particularly the closing section about the way validation is sold and profited from under our late capitalist system. If you haven't seen it and you're hungry for a video that's more centered on these issues than mine is, and which takes a harsher view on the series, go and watch it. I've put the link in the description, I'm sure it'll be worth your time. That being said, I think some of the parts of that video which actually analyze the Loki show specifically, its version of these characters and their relationship to the source material, feel a little unfair at times. For instance, assuming that aspects of Loki's character and of Asgardian culture automatically carry over from the 616 comics, and reading the show through comic logic, when, for better or for worse, this hasn't ever been the mode of adaptation pursued by the MCU. But if you've watched that video and you disagree with me, I'm more than happy to discuss it in depth in the comments or in the channel Discord server. But my general take here, and please do take this with a grain of salt since I'm, straight and cis, is given the dearth of queer stories in the MCU, perhaps a Loki show should have had more focus on sexuality. But just because of the way this show's structured, it's hard to imagine anything like that fitting into this Loki show. This is a highly serialized interstellar time travel epic, and a 6-episode one at that. So I'm not sure where or how these topics could have been explored with the nuance they'd need, especially given that the previous appearances of this character haven't really suggested that romance or sexuality of any sort play important roles in this version of Loki's life. If this show did fully explore the elements some of its critics wanted it to, it would need to have been rewritten drastically. Should it have been? Maybe. Something like this is surely needed, on the platform that the MCU of 2022 provides. But as I've suggested above, I don't think we get anywhere by criticizing Loki for what it isn't, by comparing it to some other fairly different version of itself that it potentially could have been instead. That being said, looking at the conversations which sprang up around this show back when it came out, this criticism is undoubtedly the most justified. And it's telling, I think, that the only real substantial critique of this show which retains its weight 1 year on is mostly a result of the corporate politics of Disney. If the MCU does have a quality ceiling, I think we're brushing up against it here. The real limit to how good these projects can be doesn't come down to limitations of the source material or the genre itself, it's the studio pressure to avoid anything too progressive or revolutionary from making it on screen and being the focus of a series or a project. If that is the case, then honestly, I think Loki's pretty much as good as it gets, at least until society or Disney changes. But even if this is the case, I'm still hesitant to call Loki the best one of these Disney Plus shows. At their best, Moon Knight and WandaVision can, I think, give this show a run for its money. It's hard to say really, because these projects do differ, they're not all the same. I think that's the main thing that's obvious in retrospect. That it's not a question of whether Loki is the best, that these projects should be taken on their own terms. And that it doesn't really make sense to pursue some hard ranking system, no matter how much social media algorithms tend to favour simple lists. So maybe we're best to leave things where we started, saying, yeah, Loki was pretty good, wasn't it? Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe there's a massive flaw that I missed, or maybe you disagree intensely with something I've said, or maybe you just want to let me know what you thought of this retrospective. Either way, you can let me know in the comments below. Oh, and also let me know if I should do one of these for Black Widow, or just keep it to the Disney Plus shows. But thanks for watching, give me a like if you're feeling generous, and special gratitude as always to all my patrons on screen now, especially Kevin Douglas, Ian Fifield, and Thrawn7.